Ladies and gentlemen, welcome wrestling fans worldwide to Knoxville and the Great Smoky Mountains for the Ron Fuller, Tennessee Studcast.
6 feet 9 inches tall, 265 pounds.
This historic podcast from one of the most respected and successful wrestlers and promoters will follow the footsteps of the largest and oldest wrestling family on the planet.
Listen to what I'm saying. That's right. Bring that camera in here a little bit closer.
Through 93 years and 4 generations.
The stud has arrived.
Old school or new fan, this unique broadcast will educate and captivate as Ron details decades of professional wrestling's growth with truly unforgettable stories.
I want those people out there at home to hear the stud.
Sit back and enjoy the ride with the Tennessee Stud.
The Tennessee Stud. You will learn that name. You will remember it.
And now,
the stud is here.
Hey everybody, welcome in once again. It's David Summers hosting another Studcast with the Tennessee Stud Ron Fuller. It's the story of wrestling in America, as told by the stud, whose family started the profession 100 years ago. Now we step back into the ring, back into time, into the Great Smoky Mountains, and the Tennessee Stud, Ron Fuller, living the good life. What's going on, Ron?
Oh man, just enjoying myself at some pretty cold nights now. Every once in a while I do something on social media and I get all these people responding to me. And now instead of wearing those T-shirts, I'm wearing a jacket, man. And, 26 here last night. So.
Yeah, it's not a windbreaker either, is it?
No. It's a little beyond the windbreaker some nights.
Yeah.
Some days. So, but it's what happens in this part of the country, and it's still beautiful. We still got a few leaves, in fact, on some mountains anyway, where the wind don't get to them very much, and it's been an experience, quite an experience living up here, man.
All right, but have you had the first real snow yet?
Nope, seen no snow yet. I kind of thought we might see a little bit last night, especially since it got down to 26, but we didn't get no moisture, man. So obviously we didn't get any snow, but it could happen at any time, I guess.
All right.
There's already been some on top of a Klingman's Dome.
Yeah.
Saw a picture of that. So they're getting it up there, but that's 7,000 feet up.
All right, just be ready to have your hubs locked in and chains if necessary. So, all right, Stud, there's a lot to talk about today, and all Studcast fans are definitely on fire now, Ron. The last one ended with 2 of wrestling's greatest stars being carried out, Ron. A young bruiser, Brody, on his way to fame, and the other one, the world-famous Australian Kangaroos' own Al Costello. Plus, Southeastern wrestling had become, almost overnight, the best small territory, we're talking in the world. One of the best tag teams ever. Last Studcast, can you believe it? They split up with a violent encounter that started at ringside. It continued upstairs to the Heels dressing room at Chilhowie Park, and then back outside the dressing room. Almost 4,000 crazed fans in this building, meant for 3,000, saw the future in Bruiser Brody, billed as Ronald Pope, but stretchered to the dressing room, and they saw the past in Al Costello as he was put in an ambulance. There's so much to keep up with. Neither of the two, can you believe it, would never be seen again in Southeastern Knoxville. So new stars arriving every week, and old favorites like Bob Armstrong and you are leaving after losing hugely important matches. The TV show, voted by Wrestling Writers of America as the best in the world, had Southeastern flying high as the best small wrestling territory in the entire world. Some of the greatest stars ever filled the rings. The largest per capita audiences for TV shows anywhere in the world were watching Southeastern across 5 states from some of the best TV stations in America. Listen, you had to really be pretty proud of all this, Stud. You had created something really special, and now you rewind all of it, and again, you capture the world's attention with the hottest new YouTube channel, Southeastern Rewind. It is so cool. How does it feel, Ron?
Gosh, man, it feels good, man. Just like it did, I guess, the first time it happened back 40 years ago. It felt good back then. It feels good now to be able to rewind these programs again and be able to show them to old fans. And these great old school shows, man, like the Continental and USA Championship Wrestling and the Southeastern one that's on the Rewind channel right now, they are bringing back memories for those people that watched them originally. I hear that all the time, social media. I watched these shows a long time ago, man. It's really, it's a great trip, a great ride for people to go back and see them again. And, and it's at the same time, Dave, we're also building a growing audience from new wrestling fans that never experienced these type of TV shows with great wrestlers, great angles, storylines. There's no storylines anymore in wrestling TV shows. And all of that is in these older wrestling shows.
Yeah.
There's 2 new TV shows added each week now. We're doing that. One is Continental Championship Wrestling, CCW. It was called by us, the wrestlers and those people that were dealing with it on a daily basis. It was produced weekly from 1985 through 1987, and it was the first TV show produced in a big arena, Birmingham's Boutwell Auditorium. It had multiple cameras. It even had a handheld camera for great close-ups. The first to ever do that as well. So the other TV show placed on the Southeastern Rewind YouTube channel each week was called, obviously, USA Championship Wrestling. And for those that have been watching these episodes, as I keep putting them on there, this one was done originally in 1988, and it came from the Knoxville Coliseum Ballroom, which was about 3 or 4 times as big as a regular television studio. And both of these shows were hosted by the man that many considered the best commentator in wrestling, the great Gordon Soley.
Yeah.
So both of these shows are aired. Obviously, as I have always talked about, I wanted to do it in the sequence in which they were recorded. And so fans could understand what was going on from week to week and keep up with the all-important storyline and the angles that were part of every TV show that I ever produced. And that back in the day, everybody had storylines. Everybody had angles. And, that kind of got it now to where they have writers that write the storylines, but they don't write the storylines. They don't know how to present wrestling anymore because they've lost touch with what the sport is.
Well, it sure seems like it. I like the fact that every new Studcast that we do now is now on there. And I think one of the hottest new things is going to be the Stud Stories, which you've just begun to scratch the surface on that. You also get your chance to be the storyteller, Stud. Anybody that's ever read your novel, Brutus, knows what a great storyteller you are. So there's so much more great stuff on the Southeastern Rewind channel, and it continues to grow every week. I think that's awesome. So speaking of every week, where are we going to ride on this Studcast this week, Stud?
Well, we're going to change things up a little bit on this one, Dave. We're going to do the learning tree question first in this Studcast. And we're going to do that because I'd like to keep this angle, my big angle for this Studcast has a secret card, basically, and it's got an angle on it that we've got people involved in a couple of weeks ago asking if they could figure it out. And I want to keep that angle until the end of the show. So the learning tree question is going to come from 2 weeks ago, and it asks something about smaller cities in Southeastern, how they do in attendance compared to Knoxville. And, Knoxville at this point had become one of the best wrestling cities in America. Well, next we're going to focus on the great card of November 14th, 1977. Bob Orton Jr. and Mr. Knoxville had been the Southeastern Tag Champions for the last 5 months straight. They had not met against each other since March of 1977, back when Mr. Knoxville and Ronnie Garvin was a heel. Bob Orton came in, and it's really been a heck of a deal between these two guys, and Orton defeated Ronnie Garvin when he was a babyface in the loser leaves Southeastern match. back in March of 1977. So 8 months earlier, they were contending against each other, and we're going to talk about all these things that make up this combination, and it's really a strange one. So Joe Leduc and Lee Welch, they're going to be defending their newly won Southeastern tag belts against the team that had been raising havoc, man. That was Don Carson and the Assassin, since both of those two had come back. And plus on this card is a very important match. It's going to decide who gets a shot at the NWA World Champion Nelson Royal in the next Studcast. And the TV for this one is in the rating period of November 1977. So as you can imagine, Dave, I'm going to throw in some different stuff here and some special stuff. And we're going to discuss it. We'll discuss the results of these matches from this card. And we'll also talk about the attendance.
Okay.
So then we're going to end the Studcast with...
listen, actually, I think I could help you out there, because my guess is we end with the winner of the interactive game you played with fans a couple of weeks ago. We found out what the angle was on the card that was going to be changing wrestling in Southeastern and who it would involve.
Good guess, Dave. You know, last cast, we gave an answer for a fan about an angle worked on last week's show. And it was a huge angle, but it wasn't the one I really wanted someone to figure out first. So we're going to end this Studcast with today's training. And as we follow up on the second major angle, the one that I really wanted to put the focus on, and we're going to be going big time in these last three Studcasts. We were really throwing some angles at them. So this was the major angle. And I had in mind 2 weeks ago, and when we got the fans involved to see who could figure it out, where Southeastern was headed, things began to quickly change, and they were changing fast. A lot of talent coming and going, and we're going to find out today who was able to figure out what was going to happen before it actually did. So I'm ready to ride, Dave. But and who asked that learning tree question again? I don't think I had that person's name.
All right, why not? Here we go, Stud. So a gentleman named Barry Whitmore says, how are the smaller cities in Southeastern doing in attendance compared to Knoxville that had really become one of the best wrestling cities in America? Great question there.
Yes, it is a heck of a question. And, usually, man, when you had your major cities going well in your territory, the smaller cities were going well too, and those big crowds in Knoxville meant that it wasn't just Knoxville fans that were loving what they were seeing on TV, but it was all the fans in all that part of the country that were watching the TV. It didn't make any difference where they lived. We were making wrestling fans out of them back in this stage, and our biggest problem at that time was the fact that buildings everywhere were just too small for us. And, that's a good problem to have, but, you always want to do as much as you can in any business that you're operating to be successful. So the Tri-Cities of Johnson City, Kingsport, and Bristol, Tennessee, they got their wrestling every Tuesday night. We ran in Johnson City in a little place called the Rec Center in Johnson City. It only held about 3,000 fans, and we sold it out every week. But the problem was we couldn't run anywhere else every week except that building. So occasionally we did run some weekend shows. Kingsport, for instance, there was a big high school gym called Dobbins Bennett, and it held about 5,000 people. There was another city up there, Bristol, which on the border, Tennessee and Virginia. And it had a nice gym called Viking Hall, and it also held about 5,000. So the three cities were all within 30 miles, only 30 miles apart. So we couldn't run in either of the larger two buildings regularly because they were high school gyms, and, you just couldn't get those high school gyms on a regular basis. So obviously we're not able to take advantage of the population in that Tri-Cities area like we would have liked to have done. But we were doing as much business as we could do up there, considering the sizes of the building. So everything in Kentucky was on fire, man. Harlan packed in over 3,000 in their gym every other Saturday night, and the city's population was only 3,300. So if you're doing 3,000 in the gym and there's only 3,300 live in the city, you're doing pretty good, you know.
Yeah.
And Hazard had the largest building in that part of Kentucky, you know, and we couldn't get in there as often as I wanted to, but and it held about 5,000. It was almost similar to the size of the Coliseum. It was maybe 1,000 people less than what the Knoxville Coliseum would hold. And almost every time we went up there, we just about filled up that 5,000 seat building. Hazard's population was less than 10,000, but in a town of 10,000, we drew 5,000 to the matches. I say that's pretty good per capita. That's a pretty good crowd. So we just couldn't get up there often enough. We couldn't get into that building often enough. And then we had these smaller Tennessee cities that were just selling out everywhere, all of their gyms. And a lot of times those gyms would sell out 30 minutes or more before starting time. Mac McMurray used to come in and tell me he was the referee, but he also was handling ticket sales, and he was kind of in charge of the people that handled the sales. And he would come in and tell me, Ron, we're sold out. You know, I know it's 40 minutes before we start, but there's no room for anybody else. So that's a good problem to have.
Yeah, it is.
Couldn't complain about that too much, right? Yeah. So what happened is summertime came around, and that was obviously our best time of the year because we didn't have to stay inside the gym. We could run in the football stadiums. And sometimes we'd have a bigger crowd in a football stadium in some small town in Tennessee than we could put in the Knoxville Coliseum. So the bottom line, Mr. Whitmore, per capita, the smaller cities outdrew Knoxville sometimes on a regular basis when we could get in their football stadiums.
Wow.
So we were really lucky, man, to just be in a great wrestling part of the country.
Oh, and actually, I think you guys were actually making it great wrestling country. And I mean, just the interaction in those small towns, just looking for entertainment. And there you were. If it wasn't basketball, they were. And that's what those areas of Kentucky were all about. But if it wasn't basketball, they were certainly coming to see you guys. So why don't we move to the entire card, the whole card for Knoxville, back in the Coliseum again, and I think we're at Friday, November 11th of 77.
That's correct.
All right.
Right, man. So the opening match in this card on November 11th, 77, Ricky Gibson against Jerry Myatt. The second match was two stars going at it, two quality wrestlers in the second match. Thunderbolt Patterson, who was just starting there, and he was taking on the pro, who was Doug Gilbert. And Doug had been there for many months, was a tremendous talent and a great guy to have on any card. The third match on this card had special significance. The winner was going to get a shot the following week at the World Junior Heavyweight Champion, Nelson Royal. And this one, obviously, is an international affair because it puts from England, Tony Charles, against from Ireland, Pat Barrett, a couple of the greatest wrestlers in the world. And then the Southeastern Tag Championship, the new champions, Joe Leduc and Lee Welch, are going to face off against Don Carson and the Assassin. And the next match on the card was billed as a special challenge match. And the former Southeastern Tag Team champions faced off against each other for the first time in 8 months since March 17, 1977, when Ronnie Garvin lost the Lose or Leave Town match to Bob Orton Jr. And Ronnie was a huge babyface at that time, and now he's back wearing a mask, calling himself Mr. Knoxville because he lost that match back in March against Bob Orton Jr. And now these guys are going to be facing each other again, man. The relationship between the two of them had been anything but ordinary. And so were their matches against each other. My gosh, they had some tremendous matches. Fans were going to get to see their second great single match of this card. First one being that one with Tony Charles and Pat Barrett, and now this one between Garvin and Orton. And the main event was the Southeastern Championship match. with the no disqualification rules. It was my brother Rob's first match against the Stomper since the Stomper, Don Carson, and the Assassin. All three conspired to send me out of the Southeastern. So Gorgeous George Jr., he's going to be in the Stomper's corner.
Yeah, no surprise there. That's a great card, Ron. Okay, so Charles against Barrett. Winner gets a shot at the World Junior title. Mr. Knoxville versus Bob Orton Jr. Southeastern tag title match. Leduc and Roy Lee against Carson and the Assassin. So tell us who was on the TV for November 5th of 77, especially since it was a TV rating period show, right?
Yes, it was. I mean, everything in the month of November, you had 4 rating periods during the year. Mm-hmm. November was a particularly important one because it was fall. Yep. More people were home. They were watching their TVs. Television stations really looked strong at that November and February book.
Yeah.
So this November book was a very, very important one. So Les opened up with a tight shot, and he ran down the card for the day. Mr. Knoxville was going to be in single matches after what had happened the night before, and we're going to get to that. Thunderbolt Patterson is going to be in action on this show. Irish Pat Barrett's going to be in action on this show. And the main event for this TV show is going to be a championship Southeastern tag match with the champions, Joe Leduc and Roy Lee Welch. They're going to be wrestling against Don Carson and the Assassin for the belts on television. And they're going to be wrestling against each other the following Friday night in the Coliseum. But I wanted to put them on TV against each other, man, to have people see what kind of match these guys are going to have.
Now, that's a big-time TV, Ron. What a great tag championship match for ratings, period. Okay, so who opens the show with Les?
Well, when the cameras backed away for the tight shot with Les, the shot on the set behind Les was not nearly as bold a photo as they usually were. It was something simple, with Al Costello reaching under the bottom rope to pull Roy Lee Welch's leg from under him, but instead he had reached and got Bob Orton Jr.'s leg. So when the cameras picked up Bob Orton Jr. sitting with Les, most of the studio, they had been to the matches the night before. That was always the process, man. Those fans went there, they watched the matches. They were the first ones to show up TV the next day. And most of that crowd had already seen what had happened the night before. But those at home, people at home had no idea what they were about to see. So the studio erupted in cheers, man. Bob Orton Jr., man, as soon as they saw Bob Orton sitting there with Les, they started cheering like crazy. He had definitely become a baby face in one night, man. So Les welcomed him, and they were about to show the video from the night before. And then all of a sudden, kind of awkwardly, Ron Wright just appears on the set from out of nowhere. And Les and both Bob are obviously confused. I mean, they're like, wait a minute, what? So Ron Wright, at this point, he hadn't been on a Southeastern wrestling event or a TV show in more than 4 months.
Wow.
So, it'd been a long time since the fans had seen Ron. So the studio erupted in cheers again, just like they had cheered a second ago for Bob Orton Jr. And at the same time, I kind of figured that's what's happening in houses all across the Southeastern United States, So I didn't think it was a bad deal, Ron showing up out of nowhere, but it was a bad timing. So, and it was definitely bad timing. So you could tell, though, Dave, by the studio reaction, how much they missed old Ron Wright. So Les hesitated, and then what's he going to do? He went ahead and welcomed him. Hey, Ron, how you doing, right? So, and then Orton even got up out of his seat and he offered to shake Ron Wright's hand, and Ron acted like he didn't see the gesture of friendship that, Orton was offering. Huh. I don't know whether he could or not. I'm watching the show back and I'm thinking, what the heck, why didn't he shake his hand? So anyway, he didn't shake Orton's hand. And instead, he kind of waved to the studio audience, and he had a big smile on his face. And he said to Les, basically, and the studio audience, he said, it's great to be back, And the studio popped again. They loved old Ron. By this point, everybody could tell that Les wasn't expecting Ron Wright on the show at this, in this manner. So much less in the opening segment of the show. So he politely asked Ron to come back later in the show and then visit with him, and they would talk some. So Ron said something about, yeah, he'll definitely be back, and he left the set. So Orton sat back down. Les apologized to him for the interruption, and things were off to a kind of strange start on this show. I mean, it obviously nobody expected Ron to show up, and it was going to be even more strange before this show ends. So the video shot from the night before that I just talked about, where Joe Leduc, Lee Welch were defending their Southeastern belts against Mr. Knoxville and Bob Orton Jr., was still up there behind them. And Les tried to get back in sync again, and he called for the director, Bill Kincaid, to roll a video, right? So, and this was a hugely important video because it was going to either make or break Bob Orton as a babyface. And if this was good and fans got into it, he's going to become one of the top baby faces in the territory. If it doesn't get him over, he may be leaving the territory soon. So it started with Orton in the ring, and some, like I said, something small. Costello was tripping Orton by mistake, and once that video started to roll, they'd been having these problems between Costello and Orton for 2 or 3 weeks in a row. Little things were happening that shouldn't have happened. And, and shortly after this, then Orton grabs a hold of Roy Lee in the corner. And, the video shows that he's holding him. Mr. Knoxville rears back to knock Roy's head into the second row. And Roy ducked. And he knocked Orton into the second row, basically into the second row. Orton fell backwards off the apron, and he landed on Costello, who was sitting out there in a chair, wasn't paying attention. So that type of mistake was major. It wasn't like the last little mistake. And Orton had been having problems with the Costello, and Garvin had been trying to settle the arguments for quite a bit, and I think this kind of snapped Orton when he landed out there on Costello, and Mr. Knoxville had knocked him off the apron. Then he just reached in, grabbed Mr. Knoxville's feet, jerked him out from under him, and he drug him out on the floor, and they started to fight. And this video, that's where this video just turns into something phenomenal. You could never explain it, but people watching this and seeing it basically live, it was truly amazing. So, referee, they're fighting, and, the building just went nuts. I mean, as soon as the two heels had been partners for 5 months, started banging each other and just going crazy out there, the building just got really into it. And the referee just stood there and counted them out. What's Costello going to do? He can't stop him from fighting. He's trying, but he can't get him back in the ring. And the referee counted them out. He had him ring the bell. The fight's still going on the floor, but he had him ring the bell. He went over and raised Roy and Joe's hands, and he gave them their belts. And they left the ring, and they weren't even noticed. I mean, because every fan in the building, they were only interested in what's going on over there in the fight between these two guys. Kind of like all hell had broke loose, man. So the fight between Orton and Garvin continued on the floor outside of the ring. And then they finally rolled back up into the ring. The video's picking up all of this. The fans are just wild in the building, and it was soon clear who Al Costello wanted to win this particular fight, because he attacked Orton from behind. They were both fighting, and he made his choice. I'm gonna go along with Garvin here with Mr. Knoxville, and he attacked Orton from behind, and that made it even clearer who the fans wanted to win. They made a decision for them that they're going to go with Orton. So both Garvin and Costello end up then stopping Orton, obviously 2-on-1 here. And Mr. Knoxville grabs him up and he slams him in the middle of the ring, and he goes up to the top rope. to do his knee drop from the top rope. And when he came off of there, he was as high as I'd ever seen him before in the air, and Orton moved. And wow, the crowd exploded, man, and so did the studio, man, who was watching all this on the monitors that were in the studio. And Mr. Knoxville, Garvin, landed hard on his knee, man. It was pretty obvious. And then he went flying straight through the ropes, man, out onto the floor. And he was laying out there holding his knee. Costello started on Orton by himself. Orton's still down. You know, he just moved out of the way, but he wasn't up on his feet. So Costello figured, well, this is my spot. I better get him if I can. And he started to tear into Orton by himself. And, you know, and the studio crowd, they responded to seeing what was happening at this point. And so it didn't take long for Orton to stop Costello. Old Al was had a little age on him, and he was not young like Bob Orton Jr. was at this point. And once Orton stopped Al, he threw him up in his backbreaker, man. And the building then and the studio crowd they both exploded in unison, man. I mean, you could hear the roar from the building and the roar from the studio. And Orton jumped up and down several times to just accentuate the pain on poor old Al. And then he walked over to the ropes where Garvin was still laying down on the concrete, holding his knee. He'd hurt his knee. And Costello was still sprawled out across Orton's back. So suddenly in this video, one of the worst bumps I ever saw, Orton just dropped Costello head first off of his shoulders and onto Ronnie Garvin's back on the concrete floor.
Whoa.
And there was an explosion from the crowd because they loved to see what he did. But then there was another gasp from the crowd that came immediately because it looked so nasty a bump that I thought it killed him. I thought there's no way Costello was going to survive that bump.
Wow.
You know?
Yeah.
And Orton just left the room. Right? He went up to the dressing room. He was through with him. You know, he dropped his manager on his head out there, and Garvin's got a busted knee, and you know, so he just went on to the dressing room. And when he left the building, the cameras followed him, and it showed the fans by the hundreds were reaching and patting him on the back as he went through this big, huge, massive crowd in this building. Way too many people in there for the size of the building. And the fans were just all for Orton. They were really into it. So Mr. Knoxville, he finally kind of got up out there on the floor, and he tried to get Costello up, but he couldn't do it. I mean, Costello was really hurt. So Garvin was barely able to stand on his own hurt knee.
Wow.
So he finally left Costello, and he hobbled back upstairs to where the dressing rooms were. And he's going to go back in the same dressing room where Bob Orton Jr. is, right? So in the cameraman followed him as he went up through the crowd, and he got up to the dressing room, and he went through the door. And, when he did, I guess Bob Orton Jr. was waiting on him, man. And he grabbed him, and I guess he threw him out the dressing room door. But I know that the cameraman stayed outside. But then all of a sudden, here comes Mr. Knoxville head first, come flying through the door and out into the crowd again that's out there on that second level of the building there, the old Jacobs building. Mm-hmm. And he'd been thrown out, obviously, by Bob Orton. And that wasn't enough. So Orton came on out. He brought with him a steel chair, and he crowned Ronnie Garvin on the head with a steel chair, man. And but at this point, now the crowd upstairs and downstairs in that big old sold-out park building, they were absolutely on fire. So the video ended. And it ended with a shot of Al Costello being carried to an ambulance. I mean, he was really hurt. And Les finished the video by announcing that the two of them, meaning Ronnie Garvin, Mr. Knoxville, and you, Bob Orton Jr., are going to settle this next Friday night. And that Al Costello that you see on the stretcher there getting into the ambulance, he spent the night in the hospital, and he's not likely to return to the sport for quite a while.
Ooh.
So let's thank Orton for watching this really unbelievable video. And then he wished him well next Friday's showdown with Mr. Knoxville.
Holy cow. What an opening to the TV show. And there had not even been a match yet. So how do you follow an opening like that?
Well, I'm going to follow it with Mr. Wrestling arriving. Mr. Knoxville is going to be arriving himself, man. Bust out there right into the studio for the first live match. He's got his knee bandage up. Obviously, it's hurting him, but it didn't bother the heat, man. He was really grinding heat at this point, man. And now being against his own tag partner, his heat is going to just get even better. So, and he could kind of feel all that heat, man, like any good wrestler does. A good heel anyway, when the crowd hates him so much, it makes you want to do more. You want to make them matter. And that's what he did. He just pulverized his young guy that he was in the ring with. And then he set him up and he went up. And I think one time before, Dave, we talked about it, he did something that he had never done, but one time before, he actually hit those lights up in the rafters of the TV station. He went so high that he hit those lights again.
Yeah.
And then he came down and hit that young opponent's throat with that knee, man. And, wow, it was a short match, but it spoke volumes about what was to come from Ronnie Garvin and Mr. Knoxville.
Holy cow.
Mr. Knoxville went to the set with Les. Orton made his interview out of Studio B. And the heat between these two guys was volcanic, man. I mean, they just hated each other, And they both, during the course of that interview, they promised as much violence next Friday as the fans had seen the night before. Right when they got into the fight, it's going to be worse next Friday night. That was basically the storyline. And these two always had great matches. From the very beginning, 8 months earlier, when Orton had arrived in Southeastern. But this time, their matches are going to be unforgettable. So Thunderbolt Patterson was next up in the next match. And Thunderbolt struck the dang studio crowd, I'll tell you that. And the fans at home, he had a unique style about him. And it never took Thunderbolt very long to get over in any territory where he ever went. And this was only his second match, but he was already beginning to be a star. You could see he's going to be money. So Ron Wright arrived at the set again during Thunderbolt's match. And Les obviously wasn't prepared for it again, So Les, finally, he welcomed him back, and then he had to speak to him about ask him something, So he asked him what he'd been doing in his absence from Southeastern. And Ron Wright just one word answer, really in kind of a nasty tone. And he said, "I've been doing without." he said, "My brother and I, we used to be stars here, Les. You remember those days." And he goes, and for many years we were the stars. And now it's the Fullers, it's Armstrong, it's Joe Leduc, it's Tony Charles, it's wrestlers from all over the world.
Yeah.
But we used to be the deal here, basically. So he was upset, right? So Les was kind of stunned with that answer. He wasn't expecting that, So the studio crowd, obviously, they couldn't hear what he was saying because they're watching a match up there. So the, home audience, they had to be surprised to hear that, out of the clear blue, wait a minute here, something's wrong here. So Thunderbolt came to the set after his win in his second match for Southeastern and on the TV, and Ron Wright was just leaving. So Thunderbolt gets to the set and Wright's yet to clear the set, and Thunderbolt offers his hand to Wright, and he gives him a compliment. You could hear because they're right there by the microphone, and you could hear Thunderbolt say to Ron, he said, "I've always been a fan of you, Mr. Wright." And he wanted to shake his hand. Ooh. And Ron just walked past him, didn't shake his hand. Oh. And then he said, and this was picked up on the microphone, he says, "If you've always been a fan, why don't you tell the Southeastern owners that?"
Oh.
and then he disappeared.
Ah.
So now, so Thunderbolt asked Les, what's wrong with Ron Wright? You're like, what's the deal here? So boy, but Bolt was, his interviews were just as powerful as his work in the ring, man. And he turned all of his attention, man, to his opponent in Studio B. He was wrestling the pro the following Friday night. And he just started to tore right into the pro. And they carried, and they're part of the setting up for the next Coliseum show, man. Bolt was going places for Southeastern.
All right, so what's going on with Ron Wright? I mean, the perception is he's a really good guy, but I think there's an angle in the work here.
Well, that could be the case, my man. And the show's not really but half over yet, so I'm sure the same question is going to be asked all over the Southeast. I'm sure people at home are going, "What's happening here?
Yeah.
What's wrong with Ron?" Right? Because it was very unusual.
Yeah, as you said, there's a little show left, and we have plenty of show left here. So it's a good place to take a break. Let's do that. We're going to be coming back with Gorgeous George Jr., the Mongolian Stomper, and your brother Robert Fuller on the personality profile. That is coming up next. But first, as we go to the break, let's remind you about Southeastern Rewind on YouTube. Subscribe, ring the bell to get reminders on when the greatest stories in wrestling will hit the YouTube channel. And be sure to tell your friends about Southeastern Rewind. Okay, that personality profile, it's a good one. It's coming up next right here. If you're a big Tennessee Stud fan or you know one that would like a Christmas gift from the Stud, give them something unique. Now is the time to shop the Stud store at tnstud.com. He has everything from personally autographed photos, Tennessee Stud mask, Continental DVD 5-packs with 68 matches and 12 hours of old school wrestling highlights. His hot-selling personally autographed thriller, Brutus, about a lion loose in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park, and Tennessee Stud t-shirts in black and blue. Shop now at tnstud.com. Click Stud Store and be sure to get your order before Christmas. Make this Christmas special for someone with a gift from the Stud at tnstud.com. All right, what's up? Welcome back once again. David Summers with the Tennessee Stud, Ron Fuller, on another Studcast, and we were about to find out what's happening in the personality profile. Fill us in, Stud.
Okay, so, you kind of covered it before we went to the break. Gorgeous George Jr. and the Stomper on this one. And I think Les started this one out with some video. And they got to watch their big win, the Stomper's big win over young Bruiser Brody, which is... and it was an impressive win, I can tell you that, and I doubt Brody gave many other guys that type of win. Years later, they weren't going to beat Brody like that. So it ended basically with Brody on a stretcher and being carried to the dressing room. So then there was a brief discussion started by Gigi about my having to leave Southeastern. He wanted to go back a couple of weeks and talk about the big win that his Stomper had over me and that I was gone. And he wanted to brag about that. And then he kind of got into my brother because Rob's going to be actually wrestling the Stomper the following Friday night. And he said something to Les about, wouldn't it be great if Robert Fuller was the next one out of here? So Rob had pre-recorded his interview that was going to be shown in this profile. And, and he was about the Southeastern upcoming title match with the Southeastern champion, the Mongolian Stomper. It was a no DQ, and it was shown next. Les played that. GG and the Stomper both got to see it. And Rob spoke about how it had been such a raw deal that I got, man, with three guys against just me and getting me out of Southeastern that way. He said he was definitely not going to make the mistake, of not having somebody to watch his back. The upcoming Southeastern Championship match, that he would have somebody watching his back. And he explained how bad he felt for me, not not being able to live in my home, being not being able to wrestle in this area, in the Southeastern area. And he says basically it was all because, he couldn't watch my back on that night, that he had got a bad cut from Don Carson's glove, and he was at the hospital being sewn up about the time that the three of them did the job on me. So Gigi finished by pointing out how some of the best wrestlers in Southeastern history were gone now. Poor guys, like Bob Armstrong, like Ron Fuller. Those guys are gone, and he goes, and all that's left, he says that to Les says, the poor guys like Joe Leduc, who was, permanently damaged when the Stomper busted the block on his head a few months earlier and almost broke his neck. So basically, he's making a comment that obviously the talent is not as big and as good as they were before, but he's not considering Pat Barrett. He's not considering Thunderbolt. There's a lot of great talent still in Southeastern wrestling at this point.
Yeah, for real.
So Irish Pat Barrett, he's the next guy up in the ring on the TV. And Ron Wright made himself at home again and stopped in to sit down with Les again. And his attitude hadn't changed from the beginning of the show. And Les kept trying to get him to say something nice, even asking Ron what he thought about this great wrestler in the ring up here from Ireland. Right? I mean, he's trying to have a conversation with Ron and trying to keep it civil, and Ron's wanting to be an ass, I guess is a good word for it, right? So obviously then Les, and points out, and he's not just a good wrestler, he's a great wrestler from Ireland, Pat Barrett. And so he asked Ron, what does he think of this guy from Ireland? And Ron said he thought he should go back to Ireland. He said something about, American wrestling, it ought to be full of good old Tennessee dog whoopings, at least 2 or 3 of them in every show, and that fans in this part of the country, that's what they're into, And he said the Southeastern Wrestling Company owners, he said, they don't have no idea what wrestling's really all about. And they've been, and that's why he said, if they knew, he said, they'd be booking me and my brother Donnie here every week instead of that punk up there from Ireland or where it was. So, and then he threw in something at the end about, things just need to be changed around here for the better, and you could almost hear Les at that point give up on, man, I don't want to ask him anything else. So Barrett won the match with one of those beautiful throws, man. Another one like the Tony Charles ones that you'd never seen before. It's like, wow, where did these Europeans come up with this stuff? And, Tony had won so many matches, man. And these guys, their interview, after this match, Tony goes into the other studio. Ron Wright leaves the desk again, thankfully, and Pat Barrett comes to the desk, and then they have their interview. And boy, it was extremely interesting, just for the accents alone, man. You got an Irish guy and you've got an English guy, and he and Tony Charles, they'd been wrestling each other for years and years in matches in Europe and all around the world, basically. And the one this next Friday that they're going to have to see who's going to wrestle Royal is maybe as an important match as either of them ever had. And either one of these two guys had a great chance to beat Nelson Royal. All they had to do was beat the other guy to get there, and wow, I mean, the opponent to get there is just as good as the champion. So, it was going to be a thrilling and fascinating match, man, for Southeastern fans the next Friday night between these two guys. The fans were going to be treated to some exceptional wrestling, man. So then came the TV main event, last match, championship tag match. Joe Leduc, Lee Welch. They won the Southeastern Tag Championships on October the 28th, which was about 2 weeks earlier than this TV. And they had to do it. Roy had to put his hair up to get the match. And, they won the championship. So on last week's TV, the same two guys, Roy and Joe Leduc, had been attacked basically by Costello, by Mr. Knoxville, and Bob Orton Jr. And they busted both of them open. They were bleeding like crazy, you know, and then they went the night before, they had successfully defended their belts against these same guys because these guys got into a war and a battle themselves. So they're defending their belts again today against Don Carson and the Assassin. Ron Wright joined Les as the championship match began again. I'm sure Les was happy to see him. And Les didn't have much to say to Wright by this point, and I didn't blame him. And then, you know, he'd kind of dealt with him for 3 matches in a row here, you know. So these 4 great stars had a tremendous match, man. It lasted almost 15 minutes, which is a heck of a long time for a TV match. There'd been some short matches. We had that much time left in the program. And wow, they filled it dramatically. So as the match came toward the end, Joe and Roy Lee had been in total control most of the match. And all 4 men were in the ring at the end. And the Assassin and Carson, they both stopped the guys that were with them, and they grabbed headlocks on each other, on each of the guys. And they started to run their opponents. They're going to run Joe Leduc's head into Roy Lee. And obviously that didn't work out for him. Roy Lee and Joe shoved him off at the same time. And those 2 guys collided, Carson and the Assassin, both collided face first. And they went down. Carson went down on his back. The Assassin went backwards, and he crashed into the referee. The referee, when something like this happens, the referee finds him a place to go where he's going to be safe, no matter what happens in the ring there. And what happened is the Assassin took that blow, and he went backwards. The referee standing in that corner, hoping to be out of the way. And instead, the Assassin took him out, man. I mean, he wiped him out. He smashed him in that turnbuckles, and the ref went down. The Assassin went down too, face first. And the referee crumpled in the corner, man. So Roy put Carson right away. Carson's down. He picked him up. He put him in his abdominal stretch, and Joe snatched the Assassin up, and he put him in his bear hug. Basically, the match was over, man. That was the end of it. The only problem I had was there was no ref that was going to be able to hear either one of them submit. So at this point, Ron Wright, who had too much to say in this 4th trip to the desk with Les, he jumped up out of his seat, man, and he took off to the ring. And Les screamed at him, you know, where are you going? And Wright didn't answer him, obviously. He jumped up on the apron of the ring. So, you know, it's kind of an odd now. You got to realize that the fans in the studio, they had not heard any of the comments Ron Wright had made during these matches because they're watching the matches and they can't hear what he's saying at the set.
Right.
So they can't hear what's going on. So when they see Ron Wright jump up on the apron, they think he's there to help Leduc and Roy. And they stood up. They're all stood up and started cheering, man. And so Ron goes into the ring, and they're cheering like crazy. This is going to be great. Ron's going to help them out. And instead, he reached down in his pants pocket and he drew out a tool, man, that they hadn't seen in Knoxville for years.
Oh no!
Yeah, you got it.
The chisel.
Here he comes. He goes deep in them pants pocket, and out he comes with his chisel.
There it is.
There's my chisel. He had that chisel, man, and the ref was still laying over in the corner, so he didn't run real quickly to do what he needed to do. He took his time, and he went over and he put that chisel on his right hand, and he first went to Roy. The fans were still cheering him. They were expecting something very different to happen than what they were about to see. So Roy nor Joe had any fear of Ron Wright, and so they held on to their finish holds. So Wright went to Roy first, and he happened to be facing. Roy happened to be facing Ron Wright so that he could see him, and he grabbed Roy in the headlock, and the studio crowd went totally silent. They're like, "What the heck is going on?" You know, and then, boy, he popped him in the forehead with that chisel.
Wow.
Blood squirted across the ring, man, and Roy went down face first. So then Wright went toward Joe Leduc, and Joe had his back turned to him. He didn't see what had happened to Roy. He never saw him coming. And he still had the bear hug on the assassin. And the studio, man, they figured it out right then what the heck was going on. And boy, they erupted, man. They're trying to warn Joe about, oh God, turn around, look out, look out. So Wright hit him in the back of the head. I'd never seen him hit anybody there before. But Joe's got that bald head. I guess he figured, why not? So he popped him in the back of the head with that chisel. And blood spurted across the ring again, man. And Joe went down face first. Whoa. So Wright put Carson on top of Roy, and he put the assassin on top of Joe, and he left the ring and the studio. And the referee finally got to his feet, and there the two guys are covered. And so he counted out the Southeastern Tag Champions, and he raised the new champions' hands. The studio was just going crazy, man, trying to tell the ref what the hell happened. Hey, no, Ron Wright. He don't know. I mean, he's not seen Ron Wright. Ron Wright's been over at the set. What are you talking about? So,
yes, what was obvious to the crowd, the ref was just oblivious to. So, all right.
There you go.
Are you kidding? That is crazy. So, all right. So, what happens next, Ron?
Well, Ron Wright, Don Carson, and the assassin, they go get Ron Wright. He goes in the dressing room back there. And Carson and the assassin come out with Ron Wright, and they go to the set with Les. And they're supposed to be, obviously, Joe Leduc and Roy Lee in Studio B, but neither one of them are there. They're bleeding and being helped from the ring. And so there's nobody there. So the three of them, Carson, Wright, and the assassin, they just start celebrating, man, like crazy guys, man, holding the belt up. And Carson starts it out by putting his arms around Ron Wright, man, and hugging him like he's his lifelong friend. And he screams over there to Les, he screams, now you know who the devil was. We made the deal with this guy right here. He's your devil, right? And, so the assassin screamed about something real loud. He's got the belt up in one hand. He's holding it over the head, and he says, "And it's worth every penny of it, wasn't it, Don?" So obviously, some money went into Ron Wright's pocket. So Ron Wright turned to Les, man, and he started out, man. And he started leaving those Southeastern company idiots. He said, never turned on me and Donnie. He said, the three of us here, now we're going to change this wrestling company here forever. He said, we're going to get rid of these foreigners. All these clean wrestling matches ain't going to be no more of that. These goody two-shoes wrestlers. We're going to bring back the good old days. He said, we're going to run the show from here on out, by golly. He goes, Southeastern wrestling's through. He said, you wrestlers better join us or you better find another place to wrestle. So, Les was at a loss for words, man. This had suddenly gone from just being a wrestling problem to being a company problem as well. The promotion is in trouble. So Rob and Joe Leduc, they finally showed up in Studio B, and I'm sure Les was happy to see that. He couldn't take much more right. So Les threw it over to him, right? And Rob started off saying something about why his brother. He says, you're looking over there at why my brother and Bob Armstrong are not here anymore. Mm-hmm. And he says, this is more than just about wrestling, I think, Les. He goes, this is about owning the wrestling company. It's about owning something.
Oh.
So then Joe pushed Rob aside. He had a bloody towel, but he had it on the back of his head. When he would take it and look at it, you could see the blood. Then he'd reach back and put it on that place where the old chisel had opened him up, man. And, he pushed Rob aside, and he said he didn't care. He said, I don't care. Joe was in. He did a Joe Leduc interview, man. He said, basically, I don't give a damn who owns the wrestling company. He says that right now, this is personal. He goes, He says, my good friend Roy Lee, he's on the way to the hospital right now. And he says, next Friday night, pointed over there toward the other studio. He says, next Friday night, those three guys over there in that studio, they're going to be making the same trip Roy's making, by God. He said, they're going to be getting sewn up next Friday night. He said, if they wanted a wrestling war, he goes, they got it. He says, it ain't going to be against Southeastern. It's going to be against me and Roy. And he says, in fact, he was so mad he was just really ranting. He said, I'm bringing my axe to the ring Friday night. Wow.
Okay, wow. All right, this may be the most serious TV show yet. So what happens the following Friday night?
Well, Ricky Gibson got a win over Jerry Myatt. Thunderbolt Patterson beat the pro in the middle of the ring, proving that, he's going places. Tony Charles defeated Irish Pat Barrett, and he was going to be the guy to face Nelson Royal again the following night. Just following Friday night, he had a chance 3 Fridays prior to that to win the title, and he's going to get another shot at it the following Friday night. Rob won over the Mongolian Stomper by disqualification. And true to Rob's interview in this Studcast, the one I just talked about in the personality profile, he had Ricky Gibson watching his back, and Ricky ended up getting involved in the match, and he's going to be involved in the next week's match. In fact, he's going to be handcuffed to Gorgeous George Jr. the next time they wrestle, the following Friday night. And then you had the Southeastern Championship match was next. But it was now the champions, Don Carson and the Assassin, defending against Joe Leduc and Roy Lee Welch. They were the new champions. That match was wild, man. It was so wild it had to be stopped probably at around the 20-minute mark. And in the next Studcast, we're going to talk about how Carson and the Assassin refused after this match to ever defend the belts again against Leduc and Roy. Which is a big statement to make, but I think they're going to make good on it. So the last match of the night was also a wild one, man. And it was Mr. Knoxville and Bob Orton Jr. And it was a 1-hour time limit match, and they wrestled for the entire hour.
Wow.
But about halfway through that match, they both got to bleeding. So for 30 minutes, they bled in a 1-hour match. It was one of the best matches probably in Southeastern history. It was absolutely unbelievable how long they could go and how bloody they got. It was amazing.
Wow. It sounds like just as good a night as the TV before it was. All right, so how did you do on attendance?
Well, we were at about 5,300. We're back in the Coliseum, and we're on our way. We're going to be going bigger than that for the next 3 shows in a row. We're going to break that 5,300. One of the next 3 is going to be another sellout of the Coliseum.
Oh, I bet it is. All right, so, but I think you wanted to end this Studcast with that today's training winner from the interactive contest about who was involved in the big angle in this Studcast. We all know the answer to that question now, but I think you would want to tell us who made the correct guess from a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, that's basically what I want to do, and I wanted to save it because I didn't want everybody to know what actually happened in this match. But now, since everybody does know what happened in that TV match, so and oddly enough, there were actually 2 winners in the interactive contest.
Oh,
and so we got some smart dudes out there. I was obviously asking for anyone that could tell me what was the upcoming company changing direction angle and who was involved in it. So there was a first guy named Chris Mingy, and he said, and I quote, this is what he sent, and both of these guys blow me away here. He says, I think the man behind Carson and the Assassin would be Ron Wright. And now these got to bear in mind, these guys wrote this 2 weeks before this match that we just talked about. He said, I think the man behind Carson and the Assassin would be Ron Wright. he thinks all the fans cheer for the Fullers and others, that they forgot about him, and he decides to work for the most dangerous wrestlers in the area. Right on point there. Then Jody McCoy was the second one that had it right. And here's his words. He says, new champs, Leduc and Lee Welch, will feud with the Assassin and Carson before dropping the tag titles to the heel team after revealing the identity of their new mystery manager, Ron Wright.
Aha.
Boy, something else, huh? Wow. I was blown away, So congratulations, man, to you two future bookers out there. I need to get you guys jobs, They need you in WWE. So, and I want to thank you guys for your answers and for getting involved. And I love the fact, Dave, that we've got such knowledgeable listeners out there, man. We must be doing something right in our today's training segments, man.
Yeah, I mean, you're a pretty decent trainer. Well, all right, I'll give you a little more than that. You're a little better and decent. All right, so really, I think you're doing something right with every Studcast stud, because they seem to be getting better than ever, like your Southeastern Rewind YouTube channel. Already this week, you've got 2 great TV shows. USA Show number 15, that is absolutely tremendous, and Continental Show number 4. Tell us about these 2 TV shows.
Okay, yeah, before we finish up here, Continental Show number 4. It's a short one. It's actually only 9 minutes long. Now, you got to bear in mind that these shows are close to 40 years ago, and this is the only one that isn't a regular length. The number 4 show, the best we could find was a 9-minute. But wow, the 9 minutes, Dave, is absolutely phenomenal. It's Tommy Wildfire Rich, and he's in a match going against one of the Nightmares. But it's going to end. He's going to end up fighting both of them before it's over. And the Nightmares are going to find out. They've been on these Continental shows. They hurt Johnny Rich, and they've been carrying the flowers each week and saying, "Where's Johnny, man? What's happened to Johnny? Where's Johnny?" Well, they're going to get their question answered on this show, because once they both get on Tommy, and that building is just electric, man. It's one of the reasons I wanted to have TV made in these huge buildings. Fans watch this, they're going to go, wow. People are going nuts in that building because Johnny is going to show up, man, and he's going to help his cousin out. And wow, it's a great show. So, this feud between the Nightmares and the Riches, it's going to be one of the greatest in the history of the sport before it's all over. It's almost a 2-year feud that goes on between these 4 boys. And fans are going to notice that in this particular 9 minutes of match, this number 4 CCW program, they're going to see 2 rings, because there's a 2-ring battle royal that same night. So, and I'm going to personally explain, and you mentioned those stud stories. I'm going to do the third stud story. People are going to be able to hear it the same day as we're releasing this show, as a matter of fact. I'm going to personally explain in stud story number 3 that's going to be released same time as you're hearing this. You can find stud story number 3 on the Southeastern Rewind channel, and you can go there now and you can hear the truly amazing rest of the story that happened on that night in 1985. And just to give fans an idea, Vince McMahon's WWE is making its first trip to Birmingham that very same night. They're right across the street from us in the Coliseum. And I want fans to hear what happened that night. Pretty amazing story. And this history, man, it can only be found on my YouTube channel. It's true wrestling history from the people who lived it. And those people and those stories are on every day on Southeastern Rewind. These stud stories, I think, are going to become very, very popular for fans, and look forward to everybody listening to this one, because it has special significance. I can guarantee you that. You're going to hear me talk about the Hulk. about Honky Tonk Man, about Brutus the Barber Beefcake. All of that's going to be in this stud story number 3.
Oh, there's a ton of that, and a ton of that is going to be coming in the future as well. So listen, another great one, Stud. On Facebook, become friends with the Stud on his Ron Fuller, the Tennessee Stud, or author Ron Fuller Welch page. Simply like and follow him there, and you automatically become friends with a legend. On Twitter, follow him on Ron Fuller Welch on Twitter. Get on board the hottest YouTube old school wrestling channel, Southeastern Rewind. Subscribe today and enjoy great USA, Continental, and Southeastern TV shows from the 1980s in the order they were produced, current Studcast, historic stud stories, and a whole lot more. And you can get your Christmas gifts from the Stud Store this year at tnstud.com. Click on Stud Store. You can find autographed photos, T-shirts, Tennessee Stud mask, a great Continental DVD 5-pack with 62 matches, 12 hours of classic video action, Ron's brilliant Brutus novel. You can even get it autographed, and a whole lot more at tnstud.com. Click on Stud Store. tnstud.com. Click on Stud Store. All right, that's a lot, Ron. You got a lot going on. So where do we ride next week?
Well, we're going to be riding into November the 18th, 1977. In the Knoxville Coliseum, there's going to be a world title match with Nelson Royal defending his World Junior Championship against Tony Charles. And Tony was just seconds away from beating him 3 weeks earlier for that championship. Southeastern and Southeastern tag title matches are going to be on this big card. Mr. Knoxville is going to be going at it again with Bob Orton Jr. in a no time limit this time. Mr. Wrestling 2 is on this card, and the legendary Korean Pak Song is on the next card.
Whoa.
Another today's training and learning tree question, plus a whole lot more next week.
Man, I keep saying it, then they just keep getting better and better. How do you top it?
Well, I want to thank everybody, obviously, Dave, and thank you, my man, for carrying us through this one again. I want to thank everybody for listening, and don't forget, friends out there, tell somebody about us if you like the show. Please let your friends and neighbors know about it, and please take care of yourselves and others, and may God bless us all.
And God bless you too, Ron. For Ron Fuller in the Great Smoky Mountains, I'm David Summers saying thank you for listening. Find me at davidsummersproductions@gmail.com. This Studcast is a David Summers production for Tennessee Stud, LLC.
Thanks for joining us today for this historic Studcast. The true story continues next week. So full Nelson your friends and point them in our direction for another ride with the Tennessee Stud.
1, 2, 3.
This is David Summers saying so long from the Great Smoky Mountains.